What's up, everyone? It is 3 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, which means you're tuning in to Cannabis Legalization News. I'm producer Lauren, and today we're joined by Vivian McPeak of Seattle's Hempfest. We're going to get a little news update from him. So let's just get right into it. Hey, Miggy, Vivian, and Tom, what's going on? Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, Lauren. Thanks for joining us, Vivian. Hempfest is like the OG of cannabis fests when it comes to the industry, as far as I'm aware. I mean, how long have you been organizing Hempfest?
This is our 29th year and my 29th year with the group.
Man, 29 years of Hempfest.
See these white hairs, man? They're from Hempfest.
Right. And then Hempfest, you guys, it's a core nonprofit, right? So
we're a 501c4 federal nonprofit at the moment, and we're in the middle of transitioning to a C3 for as an act of survival.
What does the C3 apply? What does that do?
Tax free.
As a C4, we're a federal nonprofit. We can do quite a bit of political lobbying, but if you make a contribution to us, it's not tax deductible. And if you're a C3, that is more of a charitable organization, more of an educational organization, and you can do only about 20% as much lobbying, but large contributions are tax deductible.
Wow.
So that's kind of the difference there. That's like the boilerplate nutshell difference.
Yeah, but think about it, then the companies may be more likely to give, companies and individuals. And that was beautiful. Like Miggy and I had never met each other except for the internet, going back 10 years ago when he bought, or the Weed Blog reviewed a copy of the book that I wrote. And then we started doing Facebook posts and stuff. But then we just kind of started doing this on a whim. I just asked him to hey, you want to start a podcast with me, don't you? It's like, yeah. All right. Well, it worked. I mean, that episode that we dropped yesterday, and if you guys are just tuning in, hopefully you checked it out. We do a news summary now every month, and that news summary is just taken off. I mean, it's over 500 views in 24 hours. But then what we also like to do is talk about specific things in the industry. And so I got to go to Hempfest last year because it was working. And I was actually starting to be able to become more of a cannabis lawyer. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's like a lifelong dream. And then I could not believe how cool Hempfest was as somebody from Illinois who had just seen a couple months before the governor sign into law. And it's like, wow, this could be coming to Illinois. And then going out to Seattle, and there was 100,000 people there, all sorts of booths, all sorts of people smoking, no alcohol, having a great time. And the thing that I really remember the most, besides Henry doing the paintings, was you guys have a Frisbee square. What is the thing that was?
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, tell me about the Frisbee tournament.
Well, when you're doing something as large as Hempfest, you get approached by all kinds of folks. And we had these folks that are the Frisbee champions of the Pacific Northwest say, hey, man, we'd like to do a little Frisbee demo thing at your event. And we're like, well, how much space is it going to take? And, is there a way to make sure that we don't hit anybody in the head with a Frisbee and stuff? And so we said, well, I'll tell you what, during these hours, we're kind of not at maximum saturation with attendance, and we will rope off this area in front of the main stage and let you guys do your thing for a little while. It's kind of just a fun thing for people to watch because, when you're baked, it's nice to sit and kind of watch cool things go on,
Yeah, and it was a little behind the stage. And so the stage would be up there and there'd be activists speaking or people playing music. And then behind the stage, there's a walkway and then there's this Frisbee square. And those guys were badasses. They were doing all sorts of tricks and stuff. And I'm like, dude, am I really high?
Or, they were baked.
They were baked too?
I happen to know because they came backstage and got baked.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Tell us what was backstage. This was really cool. Last year at Hempfest Backstage, what did you have set up?
Well, first of all, there's multiple stages, right? So there's a lot of different backstages. At the main stage, it's funny because we don't really have the same degree of ambiance behind main stage that some of the other stages do because they have more time, energy, and focus to put into it. But we've got a trailer, which is kind of, a little operations center and mostly a place for bands and speakers to store their possessions while they're speaking and us to put tools and shit like that or stuff like that. And then we have a hospitality tent where there's food being produced, a kitchen back there food being produced in real time for our speakers mostly, and some of the staff members back there. And it's pretty cool seeing. Of course, we have, some porta potties back there and stuff like that.
Well, funny you mentioned the food though, because I was thinking on the way here as I was getting excited to talk to you and to preach the word of Hempfest though. But as a volunteer and also as an attendee, I gotta say the food's always great, whether it be the volunteer kitchen that's in the little back or the for the attendees. It's always a treat, and you guys are always hosting, whether it be for the volunteers or people who are coming from out of state, like Tom did. I mean, it's always a treat for me.
Well, you got to make sure that you can, treat an emergency case of the munchies that might come up. You want to treat that in advance. It's a matter of prevention.
Yeah, and like from my recollection of the High Times backstage little area, the munchies may have come up more often after you had visited the dab desk. I'm not sure if it was a desk or booth or something. But it was the dab bar. Oh my gosh, that is something that would be so cool, and maybe like Hempfest can continue to lead the way in public consumption is coming. I don't know when it's going to be here, but it's coming. And a dab bar is freaking cool. And like a cannabis bar would be freaking cool. Just like when you walk into a wine bar or a whiskey bar, and there's all those different types of wine or whiskey back there. A dab bar would be very similar, but more like a whiskey bar, like because you're literally doing the shots of weed as opposed to like wine, which might be more of a joint or something. But the diversity of flavors and the diversity of products and the diversity of producers and farmers, it really lends itself to a craft experience that would be fantastic. And so hopefully social use will continue. And like the social use that I first experienced was last year's Hempfest, where you're just hanging out next to the cops and everybody's smoking weed, and it's cool.
Tom, one thing I want to point out is that at Seattle Hempfest, we've had 28 successful events. We average 100,000 people at the event. And in 28 years, we've never had a single injury, accident, or arrest at the event. Serious, nothing serious. We've had some, a broken arm one time from somebody who fell off the stage.
Well, you have like a whole city. It's 100,000 people. That's 100,000 people not paying attention to where they're going, tripping over their shoelaces, stuff like that. Just normal people getting hurt.
And what it shows, though, is that the cannabis community can come together year after year after year, and there's no problem. We rarely have a fight at the event. You get 100,000 people drinking alcohol. If that was like, Beer Fest or something like that, there'd be issues. Certainly if it was,
think about the public restroom issues that you would have.
People everywhere. Man. And the other thing that I want to point out is that we have a 700-person volunteer staff. We're on site for 10 days. We're building the event. We build the stages ourselves, the big scaffolding and all of it. You place everything, operate for 3 days, tear it down, clean it up, pack it out. And that's all with volunteers.
Wow.
And so if cannabis, cannabis demotivates you, then we must be the most motivated cannabis users in the world. And we're able to pull it off. And that says that the mythology that the government and the anti-pot people have been spreading is lies.
Yeah, pure and simple. Yeah, and then the lies, though, it's amazing. It's like something. It's expected. And so, like, as you travel more outside of, like, if the safe spot is Hempfest and Seattle, where like you literally are exposing people to 100,000 people coming together for this thing, everything's safe. People come to accept it and realize that what they have been told are lies about cannabis. But then you get into the South. Or you get into like rural Illinois or Tennessee and various places like that, those lies are still widespread and believed. Yeah. And so, I mean, more people need to go to Hempfest to help those lies come down. And so, like, when we're talking on the show and we're interviewing a guest or something, and they might be from a different state, we were talking about how one lawmaker from Tennessee had gotten caught, with his mileage for his public car, driving to an Illinois dispensary, which is great. People need to go to Illinois or to Hempfest to see how safe it can be and how public it can be and how accepted cannabis use should be. But man, I can't believe you have like 700 people that help you put this together. How long have you kept them all together for 28, 29 years?
Well, you just kind of nailed on one of the most challenging aspects of producing Seattle Hempfest, and that is just managing the volunteer base and keeping people coming in and out. When you got to fill 700 shirts, and people need to be trained and kind of know what they're doing, at least most of them, or at least a good portion of them. It's really a grueling, nonstop, 365 day a year a year job. We've got over 100 crews at Hempfest. Like I said, we're there for 10 days. We've got people, working 24 hours a day. We have night security and people at the operations booth all night long in case something happens. It's 1.3 mile long event site right down on the beautiful waterfront of the Puget Sound under the Space Needle.
What's the name of the park? Because I remember
it's actually 3 areas that are all conjoined. It's the Olympic Sculpture Park, Myrtle Edwards Park, and Centennial Park. And all 3 of them have different hosts or different organizations or agencies that manage them. So there's 3 separate use permits that we have to negotiate. They all have 3 separate pet peeves. And
well, that's another thing I like to point out is it's not just the 10 people and the 700 people volunteering for 10 days. It's all year you guys are negotiating contracts, permits, trying to meet the negotiation, because not only do you pay for the sanitation crews to come in, but those volunteers beforehand are cleaning things up ahead of time and making sure, statues aren't messed with, making sure landmarks are protected.
We actually protect, yes, we wrap all the signs in visqueen, in pallet wrap. We wrap art installations, which are outside of the event, where people are lining up to protect those against graffiti. We've actually paid as much as $12,000 per year in graffiti and sticker removal, because they charge us. They make, it's union in one of the parks. They won't let us take the stuff down. So we created this ingenious way of protecting all the stuff. And they said, well, you got to still be able to see the signs. So okay, we'll do clear pallet wrap around it, right? No, it's a tremendous amount of work. We do spend all year in permit meetings with the Special Events Committee of the Seattle City of Seattle, with about 15 different agencies, and they all have to sign off on every single of our hundreds of pages of plans. We have a security plan, a parking plan, a lost child plan, a medical plan.
It's like you have your own cannabis license. I mean, like, these are the things that go when you're applying to get your cannabis business permit. You're going through like very much many of the same things to be able to pull off this amazing social use.
What I'm showing you right now is the badge from our safety patrol. We have a trained, that's my badge. We have a trained safety patrol of 100 people, which are trained in conflict resolution and nonviolent confrontation and our policies and stuff like that. And the reason that you see Seattle Hempfest happening, the reason that you see what I believe is not happening really anywhere else in the world on the same degree that it's happening at Hempfest, and certainly in the same numbers, is because we're a safety first, socially responsible organization, and we have somehow, by some kind of shamanic mind melt, have been able to figure out a way to convince the authorities that we've got this. We have it handled. And after 28 years of working with the Seattle police, directly working with them during the planning stages and the event, they're like, wow, these guys have it wired. We can hang out outside of the event with their radio in our little command station while we're having a barbecue. And if they need us, they'll let us know, and we will be there in a heartbeat. Yeah. And that's what we've been, and I don't think anybody else in the world, any other stoners, have been able to create something like that. And it has not been easy. And it's because we are sincere and we're committed. We're the real deal. There's no, big grow operation. There's no big, bullshit behind it that we're trying to hide. We literally have to raise $700,000 every year to throw the event.
Wow.
And it's a free event. Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm like, man, all this stuff.
We charge money because we're constitutionally protected free speech events. So if we charge $1, then now it's a commercial event, and they're not going to give us a permit because they don't want to necessarily give us a permit. They have to, because it's a political free speech rally, and there's only 2 reasons they can deny you a permit for free speech. There's only two ways that they can deny you. One is public safety, and we have managed to create the thing all these years and nothing's ever gone wrong, or they wouldn't give us a permit. The other thing they can do is price you out of existence. That's the only two angles that they have, right? They can say, well, you can have the event, you got to do this, you got to do that, and you got to provide this. And that's what they've done. And we've been able to, every time they say jump, we say how high and we hurdle over it. And it's not been easy.
Yeah.
But now this year we're looking at an existential threat.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Right. That the organization might not survive to our 30th anniversary. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about what we're doing about that, what our plans are this year to transition the mission to survive and how people can help us.
Yeah. What are you going to be doing? I mean, because it's August 2nd. So like about a year ago, I flew out there. So it's typically what, August 18th, somewhere in that weekend,
or third week in August, every year annually. And that would be the 14th, 15th and 16th this year. I mean, I don't think I have to tell anybody that there's no large events with 100,000 people.
We are.
Right,
it's 50 in Illinois. 50. What's the limit in Seattle?
Especially a bunch of people sharing pipes and joints from mouth to mouth.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which is an aspect of Hempfest that you don't have at 99% of the other events in the world. Right. Which means that it would be a catastrophic disaster right now if we had Hempfest in its traditional form. When the COVID-19 pandemic showed up in about February of this year, we're like, well, man, we're in August, right? So no problem. I mean, how long could something like this last, right? It's going to be over in no time, right? And then a couple months went by and we're like, God damn, man, this thing seems like serious, And then a few more months went by and we're like, oh my God, this isn't good. Yeah. I don't think we can have the event. How can we have this event safely? Number one. Number two, are they going to even give us a permit? So we started approaching the city and saying, look, you got to give us some direction. We're accepting vendor money and stuff. And we've been operating for months here, and are you going to give us a permit in August? A special event permit? We haven't got our preliminary permit like we usually do by now. What's the deal? Yeah, the city wouldn't tell us anything. They're like, well, we are going to defer to the governor's office. Blah,
I don't
blah,
think
blah.
they knew. I don't think they knew.
I don't think they knew. Number one, and number two, they didn't want to be the people to shut down all these businesses, all these events, right?
That's
right.
I mean, they were trying to figure it out too. What the hell do we do, right? I don't think they wanted the liability of shutting down millions of dollars of revenue. And so we're like, well, we had a lot of internal discussions. What do we do here? How do we do this? What's the ethical thing to do? What's the practical thing to do? We don't know what's going to happen. So we decided, well, if we don't have a decision by June from the city and the state, then we're just going to have to call it, right? And so June rolled around. And it was about July 1st. And so anyway, mid-June, we're like, well, the event's not happening in the park. We don't see a way that we can safely produce this event, and we're not sure if we're going to get a permit. And then by July, the city finally said, we're not processing any special event permits through September. Just last week, they came out and said, we're not processing any through December. Yeah. So there's going to be no special events in Seattle this year.
Wow.
We're not sure about next year. Let me just say that plunged Hempfest $120,000 in debt. Wow. We have zero revenue coming in right now. Zero revenue. We're defaulted on our store and offices, which have been closed for months. And
there's no way you can get PPP money, right?
We applied for all of those grants, and because we were a C4, not a C3 nonprofit, we didn't qualify. And let me just reiterate, we're transitioning right now. In fact, when I get done, I just sent some sample bylaws to our attorney 10 minutes before this to review because we need to fundraise to survive.
Yeah. You guys are important. I just need to point out to the world why you guys are so important, because this evil beatdown by the police that happened at Seattle Hempfest is the kind of shit that happens all the time. It shows the relations can always happen. Good relations can happen with the police. That's not. I've always taken away from Seattle Hempfest is, I didn't have to fear the cops. I didn't have to have this onerous. It just shows that we can get along. It shows as human beings we're respectable, and that's what Hempfest has created, this safe space. And you guys are so necessary everybody needs to donate. Go to your store, right? We can still go to your store and make purchases.
Why don't you just but like for the donate, why don't you just throw it up online and do an event and just save our Hempfest type of thing, raise some money?
Mention that, Tom. It's funny you should bring that up. We are doing well. First of all, on August 15th, which is our traditional date, Saturday, this August 15th, we're going to be in the parks, socially distanced, cleaning Myrtle Edwards and Centennial Park, which is we normally would clean the parks before the event, every day, all night during the event, and then we clean up every cigarette butt. We sanitize that 1.3 mile place, pick up every stitch of trash, every cigarette butt, walk through the rocks, pull all the broken glass out, everything, and leave it pristine when we leave, because that's the way you do it. Leave no trace. It's a responsible way to do things. So we're inviting people to come down and help us clean the park from 1 to 5 on Saturday. Nice. On Sunday, we're doing a 4-hour 1 to 5 reveal, a kind of a preview online at hempfest.org, a live preview of the October 10th and 11th Global Hempfest live stream event that we have planned.
Cool. We
are going to transition the mission to try to keep the fire burning. Because, we got to keep the messaging going. There's this idea we hear from people. Oh, Hempfest, is that still going on? Isn't it legal?
Yes.
And I bristle at that. That really pisses me off because no, it's not legal. Walk into Idaho, 5 steps, light up a joint. Tell me how legal it is. There's 40 people serving life in prison for cannabis. There's tens of thousands of people in prisons and jails for cannabis right now. Somebody's being pulled over right now in some state.
Or like, what if you have like more than an ounce? What's the limit in Washington State? Like, you can have too much, and then it's a crime again.
Well, it's a felony if you have over an ounce. Actually, we don't even have home grow here. We have made tremendous progress, absolutely, but we're not done. It's like, excuse me, I didn't get the memo. Did they let everybody out of prison? It's legal. Yeah, it's not legal.
Lance Glor's free. No,
awesome. It's not. You go to the store and buy an ounce of weed. That is great, but we're not done. Nope. So anyway. We are, and so we're trying to make it to our 30th anniversary for one. Yeah. Number two, I don't have a lot of rodeos left in me. This old cowboy doesn't have a lot of rodeos left. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and I'm getting older, and I've got health issues and stuff. I would like to see a bunch of young people, a bunch of racially diverse, gender diverse young people, take over Seattle Hempfest for us.
Do you have some SOPs for them? Because it sounds like it's a huge thing. So but you've been doing it for so many years. So are there like SOPs for Hempfest that we could copyright and then sell to other states? Be like, here you go. This is how you would go about doing it right. Because your SOPs would be like 500 pages long.
Tom, we've licensed the event. We have a trademark on the word Hempfest, and we have licensed it we have an Alaska Hempfest and an Oregon Hempfest. There's several Hempfests over the country that we're helping. We're giving them support, media support and permit, legal advice and stuff like that. And so what we're doing this year is on October 10th and 11th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're doing a global online Hempfest. The theme is the Green Renaissance. And what that means is we're calling it a 2020 vision of a post-COVID future. And what that means is cannabis as a catalyst in reimagining a just, healthy, sustainable global society based on public health, social justice, environmental preservation. Yeah. This pandemic has exposed glaring structural deficiencies that are compromising the current economic and environmental health and sustainability of humanity. And with this online Hempfest, we're going to present an overview of the role that cannabis can play in a post-pandemic reset to aid humanity in forging a path to a more viable and sustainable future. And what does that mean? Well, some of the panel topics that we have is green energy, and that's hemp biomass, biogas, hemp ethanol. Believe it or not, hemp carbon nanomaterial for high-powered supercapacitors, because hemp fiber battery storage is reported to be better than graphene. Green economy, what does that mean? That's the CBD and hemp industry, medical cannabis, cannabis and banking, environmental best practices. Green construction, a really important one for sustainability. And that's hempcrete. Hemp concrete is just lime and hemp fiber and it's completely non-toxic. It is actually, not only is it carbon neutral, it's carbon negative. It sucks carbon out of the air for 10 to 20 years as the lime hardens in the cement. It alkalinizes the air. When they put senior citizens in hempcrete homes, they tend to live 8 to 10 years longer because it alkalinizes the air, and illness creates an acidic environment. What is green construction? Hemp fiberboard, which of course is a part of carbon sequestration because it preserves trees. Hemp as thermal insulation, hemp as vapor barriers, construction. Green agriculture, and that's hemp foods and cooking and CBD and decentralization. Cannabis permaculture, cannabis for soil and heavy metal remediation, because it's the #1 natural remediator of heavy metals and radiation out of the ground. Agrihoods, right? Green regenerative agrihoods, things like that. Green justice, and that's the continued racial and gender equity. Of course, the Black Lives Movement, stop and frisk, disproportionate racial incarceration, continued cannabis reform. And those are things like prisoner advocacy and criminal justice reform, record expungement, re-entry assistance and training for people getting out of prisons.
Nice.
Green medicine, which is cannabinoids and endocannabinoid system, and terpenes, the entourage effect.
People need to know that better.
It goes on and on, you know.
Great catalog, though. Nice.
Yeah, that's
I love podcasts, magazines, and websites. So these are all the ways that cannabis is a vital component to this kind of post-COVID reset, because we can't go back to the normal that created Donald Trump and,
right.
and the racial inequalities for the BL movement is fighting, and
all that pollution that just kind of cleared up after everybody was told to go home and not fly anywhere or do anything, and it just kind of was like gone.
Yeah, I mean, we got climate change coming. We can't go back to normal. This is our opportunity. We see now that, look, we could have done all this stuff a long time ago. It's not the end of the world. Yeah. We need to do things differently, or we're all going to die, or our grandkids are going to live in a world where they might survive, but they won't have quality of life. It won't be worth living there.
Yeah, all those lies from like the 1930s about marijuana, they set us back decades. We could have been so much further and cleaner than we are right now, and healthier as a society. Well, but I love that aspect of Hempfest. That it was because you said it was it's a First Amendment political rally, and it's a free speech thing. And you guys have tents where you have symposiums and panel discussions. And so, like, no, it's not like Lollapalooza, everybody. You don't just go there, smoke weed, and like there's somebody partying. There's like a tattoo tent. There may be a tattoo tent. I'm not sure. But no, there's like literally symposiums. And so like you would go and they're debating types of policy that need to be done, or explaining an aspect of the plant, how it's all day, every day. It's great. And so like that was one of the things, because we have a cannabis event here in Peoria called like Cannabis Camp. Of course, canceled this year as well, but it didn't have that necessarily aspect. It just had more booths. And I'm like, it'd be great if we had more of that Hempfest aspect, where it's this symposium where you have a panel discussion and people discussing aspects of it. But the cannabis industry is similar to Hempfest in that sense, where they have this panel discussions, and it's an event. Like there's just been no events in cannabis this whole year. So those people like at MJ BizCon and all those other ones, there was just a cavalcade, and it was kind of like a traveling circus as the cannabis industry. That's just all stopped. And so here in Illinois, we're still waiting for like legal, winners to open up our industry, so it's not just the monopoly of the biggest players that are just raking it in right now. And the what you have with Hempfest is fantastic in the sense that it provides that advocacy aspect of it, and that's why we wanted to have you on our Sunday advocacy program. But how are we going to be able to access? Because it sounds like you're going to have events and it's going to be a lot of speakers. How do we access this online Hempfest this year?
Well, Tom, we're going to have panel discussions like we normally do all day, both days, on all these topics and more. And then we're going to have keynote speakers. We've got Julie Chiarello from Skunk Magazine, and Green Renaissance was something that she actually came up with about a year and a half ago as a answer to the Green Rush, as an alternative to the Green Rush idea, right? But I could get into that, but I won't right now. And we will have actually live music performances. We have a band from Chile, a band from Japan, and a band from Russia lined up already. And the cool thing about a live stream event, we're like, okay, we've been given a freight train of lemons. How do we make lemonade out of this? What's the upside of being forced to do a live event? And you can't recreate 100,000 people on the waterfront, man, listening to bands and stuff. There's just no way to try to do that online. So we're like, well, at an online event, at the actual event, if you want to bring a band or a speaker in, they got to fly in or drive in somehow. They got to stay somewhere. They got to eat. They got to take a day or two out of their schedule. Well, everybody's got Zoom together now. A speaker can just Zoom in for an hour like I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Which means theoretically we can get people from anywhere, people we normally could have never gotten, right?
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it. And the other thing is only 100,000 people can come to the physical Hempfest because we only have so much room. Anybody in the world can come to a live stream event. So theoretically, you can make a global event. So that's why we're going 12 hours so that we can repeat the whole thing for the next 12 hours. And then anybody in the world in their time zone can watch it. So we are actually having to build a different web platform for this. First of all, it's a lot more complicated than we ever dreamed. It's an entirely different world doing an online event. It's actually really complex, and we don't really know what we're doing. So we're working with some folks in Oakland that through our Hempfest family connections that we had, people that do live stream events, and they're they're culture and industry people. They understand their brothers and sisters. They get it. They're brethren.
They believe in the message.
They know. Yeah, they're right with us. There's
a lot of people just believe in the money, and I'm like, just gotta watch out for that guy.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the green rush, right?
Yeah.
The green renaissance is the alternative to. So we're building a new platform. It's going to be at hempfestonline.org. But our reveal that we're doing, our little sneak peek discussion about it and presentation on August 16th this year is going to be at hempfest.org, our normal website.
Cool.
But on October 10th and 11th, on 10/10/2020, 10/10/2020 and 10/11/2020, it's going to be at hempfestonline.org.
Word.
We need to keep this organization alive so that we can continue to do this advocacy and educate the public, and get the word out that cannabis is about so much more than just getting high. I mean, getting high is a good thing, and it's important that anybody that wants to, it's not for everybody, but it's important that everybody that wants to has the opportunity. But it's really about an entire alternative paradigm of possibilities and potential to save humanity and to make this a world which is more just and equitable and sustainable and regenerative, and all those things. And we see this BLM movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a tremendous awakening, a global, tsunami of awareness of structural injustices and structural outrages, which we need to turn around. It's a great opportunity, and it's energizing an entire movement. Millennials are the largest generation in the history of the world. There's never been a generation as populous as millennials. Oh, wow. And they're waking up, man. They kind of get it, and they're fighting for their future.
Yeah.
We don't have many more generations to turn this around. There won't be a future for humanity. And the cool thing is, who would believe that the pot plant can actually play a role in almost every aspect of humanity in giving us regenerative, sustainable alternatives?
I would say Viv knows who would believe that, because Jack was on his stage.
He wouldn't shut up about it. He'd be like, Jack, I get it. Okay. But then he would keep going.
That man, we're 1 degree from Jack Hare. I'm just saying.
Yep.
Not just Jack. Woody Harrelson was on stage. I mean, he's had a lot of.
Think about like how successful we've been over the past 18 months, and like I'm just a farm boy from Peoria, Illinois, like a backwater attorney, and there he is. There's the man, Jack Hare.
There's Jack
Terror.
There's Jack taking some hemp oil backstage in the main stage.
Hey, Vivian, is that from your book?
This is my book, Protestival, 20-year retrospective of Seattle Hempfest.
You can get that on Amazon, by the way. That 20-year perspective.
Got a full-length DVD of our 10th anniversary documentary in the back with Woody Harrelson and stuff. And
nice.
Yeah, it's been a great 29-year journey to justice. We've had Dennis Kucinich and Jill Stein and Gary Johnson.
Well, I think you're going to just about to reach out so many more people. I mean, like that's really, it's like I said, like, I'm just a poor farm boy from Peoria. And because I was able to go online and you're able to reach a huge audience. And so that there's probably been millions of people that have gone to Hempfest, $100,000 over the years. And then those millions of people have told other people, and you gave it to them all for free. And so they had that experience that's so much. And so they should have like a lot of built up goodwill toward the event and then toward its message. And so they should really be ready to, on 2020, be able to support Hempfest taking into its 30 year, man.
The answer will be getting the word out. We actually have a crowdfunding campaign that we're going to launch. You know, we need to raise 120. We need to pay back these people that paid us money.
Yeah.
And the Hempfest model, like most or many festivals anyway, is that January would roll around and we would collect returning vendor money from our annual vendors that want to come back and preserve their space so nobody else gets their space. Maybe they got booth 420 or booth 533. We have over 350 vendors at Hempfest on that mile and a half expanse. And so they would pay money and reserve their space for the year, right, in January. And that's the money that we would use to operate the seed capital until about June or July when the real vending and sponsor money come through. And then another like $600,000 would come in. And then they would all get their value in August, right, that they paid for. Well, this January rolled around. We took we literally were down to almost nothing because the state passed a law about 5 years ago banning cannabis businesses from advertising at events like Hempfest.
Yeah.
And that cost us
Which is terrible. I mean, like, how come that's not a First Amendment challenge right there? It's like, hey,
because we're in court right now suing the state of Washington, and we're moving into appellate court, right? We just won a lawsuit against the city going after our members.
On the Flintstones. Flintstones, they would have cigarettes. They were advertising cigarettes on the Flintstones in the 60s. You cannot advertise the cannabis and alcohol.
I go to Fremont
today,
Seattle,
the Budweiser
Red Hook stage with big bottles of Red Hook, and they have a beer garden right across with kids watching people drink beer. But anyway, really quickly, so we brought in $120,000 of returning vendor money in January. Everything's great, functioning as usual. Paying the rent on our store, paying our tiny little 3-person staff, and paying all the storage fees we have for all this equipment. I mean, all the expenses that we have.
Right.
And then months roll by, and then it was by June, we're like, oh shit, we can't have the event. We had already spent more money. We already spent over half of that money.
Yeah.
And to pay people back. And our lawyers are like, well, you can't pay anybody back unless you can pay everybody back. And we're like, well, what do you mean? They go, well, you can't be the ones to figure out who gets paid, who doesn't, how much people get paid, because that's a form of fraud. It could be maybe you or your brother or your friend or something is in on this. And so it has to be either an adjustment attorney or a bankruptcy attorney or what have you, or you need to come to some agreement with these people that you'll either give them the value next year, give them alternative value and stuff. So we got to pay these people back.
Yeah.
Number one, because we got to pay these people back because that's the ethical way to do. And Hempfest has been ethical its entire existence. We've never defaulted on a payment to anybody in the history of the event, 30 years almost. Number one. Number two, if we can't pay everybody back, we won't have an event also. Yeah. Right. And number three, we won't have any returning vendor money in January. If we've already got the returning vendor money, then we have no money to operate until the event, right? The next year. So I mean, it's a challenge. We're in a fight, an existential fight for the very survival of the event.
Yeah,
it's the most stressful, along with everybody else in the world. I mean, we're not alone. This pain is being shared. Oh, poor Hempfest. It's not like poor us. I mean, my God, there's 40 million people in America, 40 million people looking at eviction in this country right now.
Yeah. And unemployment benefits that are just changing today. Like tomorrow's Monday, and that money that they thought was coming, that had been coming for the past 3 months, isn't coming anymore. Congress hasn't done anything.
Yeah. We have the worst leadership we've ever had.
No, it's pathetic.
No,
it's pathetic.
Horrible.
It's a global crisis, and we don't know when this is going to end. We're having a second surge of the first surge right now. We're not even in the second phase.
We're not even done with the first.
Yeah, and we're looking at close to 160,000 people dying This thing's tremendously contagious, and
Yeah.
people are getting COVID fatigue.
Yeah,
right?
fatigue.
So we're really looking at some challenges here.
Hey, Vivian, have you guys thought about maybe with your upcoming event throwing in a sponsorship package with those vendors that you owe? Like, say we missed Hempfest, because I mean,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they should work with you. I think
the challenge, though, Miggy, is that if you've got a website and you sell stuff online, that might work. If you're a food vendor and you got a bunch of food booths at Hempfest, right? You can't sell food online.
Yeah.
Right? You can't sell hamburgers online,
Those poor people, because like think about it, it wasn't just
Yeah.
Hempfest that got shut down on them.
This is a crisis. It keeps me up at night. I'm
damn.
sweating.
So sorry, dude.
No, man, it's
people
everybody.
have the rug pulled under them as well. No, it's the worst nightmare of my life of we've ever experienced, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those folks understand what's going on. They get it. But that doesn't mean that they're not hurting.
Yeah.
And some of them, of course, are like outraged. What do you mean you don't have my money, you bastard, right?
Right.
And so, no, it's. I've spent a lot of time with attorneys in the last 5 months, man.
Yeah, me too.
Our board went from meeting once a month to meeting once a week to meeting twice a week on Zoom.
Oh shit.
And we're weary. We're beaten. We're hurting, man. But it is what it is. And
but think about that. That's
comes to the territory, man. You got to rise to the occasion. You got to face the music. You got to deal with it every day.
I think so, but I think it's also representative of all events. All event businesses are feeling this exact same thing. All event businesses.
Think about it. How many restaurants in Seattle here will never be? They're gone.
Yes.
They're not coming back. How many mom and pop businesses? Amazon has crushed. Maybe, who knows, 1 million businesses, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
Tons.
So this is a challenge, but the cannabis community has been through a tremendous amount. We have a camaraderie. We've been attacked. We've been persecuted. We've been imprisoned. We've been disgraced. We've been scapegoated. We've been profiled. And this is just one more opportunity for us to come together as a community and show the world what we're made of, that we are a beautiful, on a large part, spiritual, artistic, responsible, creative, global community that's a threat to nothing except a bag of potato chips or a bowl of ice cream.
Oh, no.
Right?
You're a threat to the largest thing, and that's why I think we've been marginalized. You're a threat to pharmaceuticals' bottom lines, timber companies' bottom lines, dairy companies' bottom lines. Just like, let's see, most agriculture, petroleum.
Big agro, big energy.
Big energy.
These are all the things, Tom, that we're going to talk about. That's all the things that the Green Renaissance addresses, is that we're going to have the experts saying, this is how cannabis is the alternative to the energy problems. This is how cannabis is the alternative, one of the alternatives to big agro. This is how cannabis is one of the alternatives to unsustainable practices, to pharmaceutical medicine. Instead of being the first choice for intractable pain, cannabis should be pharmaceuticals should be the last choice. We've got an opioid epidemic with more people dying in 2 years than Vietnam because they're just giving everybody these dangerous narcotics.
The pills.
Yes, exactly. And they're making billions of dollars and killing people.
Yeah.
Cannabis isn't killing anybody, right? And so cannabis ought to be the first line of defense for intractable and chronic pain. And a bunch of other, illnesses and diseases, as we know.
Just the first option to take care of yourself, the wellness option.
And it's not going to work for everybody. Fine. Yeah. Let those people move on in succession to the other more dangerous, more addictive pharmaceuticals, right?
Yeah, cut out 80% of the, right. If it works for 6 out of 10 people, great.
Right now what they're doing, Tom, is they're giving people treatment plans. And when you got to sign a contract that says that if you use cannabis, you will be denied your meds. In fact, you might even be denied your medical assistance.
Or your health care payments. They'll be like, oh, no, I'm sorry. Or like anything.
And the insurance, if the insurance bullshit that they're doing on businesses saying you got to P-test people or your insurance premiums are going to be sky high, right? All of it. It's all just a part of a concentrated, deliberate,
like marginalize the cannabis consumer.
It's a conspiracy to rip us all off, right? Yeah. So that they can control these markets and have industry market control.
With shittier products, by the way, shittier products that were more likely to addict and kill you. And like, shit, why is this made out of like wood and when it could have been made out of hemp? You know, how come we had to do all that deforestation? How come I'm putting petroleum that we pump out of the ground from Saudi Arabia into my car as opposed to?
And you know, the problem is, I go to the pot shop today, and what do I get? I get a single-use plastic container for my weed. Why isn't it hemp plastic, which is biodegradable? Why?
Yes.
Right?
Because there's no money in it yet. They only legalized industrial hemp a year and a half ago.
I have a podcast as well, and I just interviewed the guy from Sauna Packaging.
Yes, great guy.
Who's making biodegradable hemp tubes, biodegradable hemp containers and stuff. So the technology is out there. You know, we have to get the hemp processing plants built all over the country because we've got all this bulk hemp coming out, but they need to have the processing facilities. But it's slowly happening. But we got to keep the message going. Keep the fire burning.
Well, think about it, like we're really only in year 2 of legal hemp. And so like this is year 2 of legal hemp. We're doing just fine. If that schmuck in the White House hadn't have been there, and if Hillary would have gone to Wisconsin once, but still, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, there's an election in November. And so I really have a lot of optimism for the industrial applications of the hemp plant. But because of the startup costs that are high, and right now the profits in CBD oil and then in CBG oil coming, that's fine. Allow those profits to be there. Get the crop insurance, crop futures, these types of things are coming. The capital will get there as the industry matures, and then you're going to have these types of industrial plants so they can start taking out plastic. Because when we had the Santa packaging guy on, he did mention how he had some hardships in sourcing plastic material from cellulose in American hemp, because it just wasn't as established as Canadian or European hemp. So like I'm optimistic, but I'm impatient, you know, and frustrated because we've been locked inside for the whole year.
Well, funny is I got 2 vegans here, and there was a recall today about some meat that had some plastic in it. I mean, imagine if there was hemp plastic, because that'd be more biodegradable and less of a risk to the consumer. I mean,
I don't know.
And you know, when the first year that we had Jack Hare come to Hempfest in '91, and I introduced him. I've always been the MC of the main stage, and he got up on stage. It's like, hemp can save the planet. Hemp is the answer to everything. And after the event, you know, we're getting high, and I'm like, God, Jack, you know, don't you think that was a little bit extreme? I mean, maybe if you toned it down just a little bit, it'd be more believable. And he goes, bullshit. Hemp can save the planet. And it didn't take me long before I realized, my God, he's actually telling the truth. He was spot on, you know. And man, I got some great stories I could share about Jack.
And I have a concentrate. I have a concentrated Jack, but I hear that the strain itself is a sativa dominant, and Jack, and you might be able to give us some firsthand perspective on this, was more of an indica man. Have you ever smoked with Jack? What type of preference did you have?
I smoked many times with Jack. You know, one time the Herbivores, which is the house band at Hempfest, this is in I think '94. They donated 2 pounds of pot for the magical joint toss, which used to happen for many years, for most of the years.
Yes.
And so we're in my house in Wallingford at the time, and everybody's rolling joints as fast as they can. Jack, this is like the day before Hempfest. So we got newspaper laid out on the floor. We got these 2 pounds of weed. Everybody's got rollers, you know, on paper plates. We're rolling joints, and there's a knock on the door. And I was in the group called the Seattle Peace Heathens at the time, and we produced this crisis guide, a physical crisis resource directory guide for homeless people and elderly people, and you know, all the above medical stuff. And so there's a knock at the door, you know, and everybody's blazing, and the place is filling with smoke, like Cheech and Chong smoke. And I open the door, and there's this guy there. He says, "Hey, is this the Peace Heathen house?" And he's wearing a marijuana narcotic shirt with a big joint with a red slash on it and a Bud Busters hat. And I'm like, oh my God, this is '94. And I step out and close the door real fast. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I want to talk to you about getting Marijuana Anonymous in the crisis guide. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get this guy away from the front, we had a huge bay window, you know, and everybody's in rolling joints. And I'm like, oh shit, you know, what do I do? We're so busted if this guy knows what's going on. And then the door opens and Jack looks out and he's like, Marijuana Anonymous, what the hell? And I'm like, oh God, you know. Jack walks out and starts talking to this guy. And after about 30 minutes, and proselytizing to the guy, and the guy's like, look, I'm not against legalization. I just have a problem with cannabis. I'm a cannabis addict. And Jack's like, cannabis addict, And so anyway, long story short, that guy ended up volunteering the next day. He helped us build the entire stage in his Budbuster shirt and his MA shirt and Budbuster's hat. And he volunteered and worked the whole entire day. And then about 5 years and became a member of the group. And now he's a blazer, man. Now he's pot every day. And somehow Jack was able to connect with that guy and they became best buds, right? But yes, Jack did like the indica. Jack had a very high tolerance, of course, because he smoked morning, noon, and night. He only smoked on 2 occasions, which is weekdays and weekends, right? He was one of the most intense, driven people I've ever known, actually. He was a very complicated guy. Jack was a very good bro. Jack in 2000 and I forget exactly when he had his stroke, but he had a stroke and he could barely talk. And that would be the end of it for most people. They wouldn't be still on the circuit speaking engagements, man, if they had a stroke and lost their ability to vocalize. Jack didn't miss a step. He continued to speak at events until he got better and better and better at speaking. The only Hempfest he ever missed until he died was the year that which I think was 2010, the year that he had a stroke. And then he was right back on the circuit. I mean, it would have stopped most 90% of people. There was no stopping Jack, man.
Well, he was 100% for the cause. I mean, 100% for the message, 100%, he devoted more out of his pocket than, we don't have a present day Jack Hare, No,
we don't.
We don't. Profiteers.
Yeah.
He traveled the country selling his book. He funded his entire operation by selling The Emperor Wears No Clothes, the Bible of the modern hemp and cannabis movement, And he gave his life, I believe. I believe that he died at Hemp Stock in Oregon, giving us on stage, man, speaking, or maybe just finished. I think he just finished his speaking. He literally died backstage at an event.
Dang.
Right? So I mean, the guy gave his life for this movement, which is why we can't stop now, and which is why Hempfest can't let the COVID thing stop us. The whole, none of us can let COVID stop us. We got to get the word out, keep going, because we got to save humanity and we got to get people out of prisons and jails. And we have to, and the other important thing is racial and gender equity. People of color have been disproportionately targeted and persecuted throughout Prohibition. I mean, longer than that, but especially by Prohibition.
I think that's why Prohibition came about around the 1930s, because it was with the Jim Crow, and then they also had the segregation. They're like, you know what? The 13th Amendment has a problem. It freed these people unless we arrest them.
In prison and demonize them, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so the people that went to jail and prison for cannabis and the people that have been marginalized with this messaging, they should have equal, if not more, opportunity to be involved in the industry. So we need training and placement for people of color in the cannabis industry. And I don't just mean for employment, I mean for management and ownership positions, right? And there are people like Rashawn Everett of the Greenwood Project in LA doing just that, right? And then we also, women are historically in corporate world, they hit the glass ceiling, which is where you can only go so high, and then there are these barriers to promotion in this male-dominated corporate world. Well, there's the glass ceiling in the cannabis industry, where it's still a lot of older, dudes, white men who control the money, which means they control most of the industry. And so it's just really important that we work and to spread awareness and opportunities of gender and racial equity, as well as we build a more sustainable movement. And that really connects with the BLM movement and what's going on there. I mean, it's so important to find the alliances with the young activists today and protest movement between cannabis and everything else going on. This is a real opportunity for us to unite and get our messages combined.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, you know, Tom and I talk about all the time how part of the systematic racism is because cannabis prohibition is based off racist lies. I mean, blatant racist lies in Congress.
Racist lies. But then it came around, like, you know, right around after, well, the KKK got very popular, like around 1915 with the Birth of Nations and all that crap. And so, like, it was on that tail end of stuff. And then alcohol prohibition had just been, you know, renewed, I guess. Well, alcohol prohibition had just been postponed. So all the G-men were, you can't expect that these government buffoons to actually go home and get real jobs. And so they just started arresting drug users, and those drug users tended to be black and brown people. And then suddenly the 13th Amendment wouldn't make them free anymore because now we could punish them and put them into a chain gang. And then
Harry Anslinger had to figure out a way to keep his funding going when all of a sudden prohibition for alcohol ended. And so he dreamed up this idea of targeting cannabis, and they used racism and yellow journalism. He worked with William Randolph Hearst, who owned, you know, millions of acres of timber, which they used for newspapers. So they needed to stop hemp and Dow Chemical and DuPont and all those guys. They had to stop cannabis, biofuel. Plastics. And then the American Medical Association was put together partially in the 30s just to combat medical marijuana. No, it's a tremendous. It is one of the conspiracies of the 20th century. Actually,
yes, it's our great cancer. America's, you know, that blatant, as long as this law exists, prohibition exists, it's the inequality, it's always going to exist.
Yep.
So crazy.
No, it's a righteous cause, man. And
yeah, and Vivian, you know, because this being such a righteous cause, going to Hempfest, man, it's just the activist world is so huge. You know, you when you start off as an activist, you think it's just you and whoever reads High Times, and then you go to an event and you see the variety of people, you know, just so many types, you know, from conservative to far left. I didn't even know that was still a thing in cannabis. You know,
we actually had Tea Party Congressman Dana Rohrabacher,
yes,
Republican congressman, speak at Hempfest for 3 separate years. I was like, wow, I'm on stage with Dana Rohrabacher, a guy
from the Rohrabacher Farr fame.
I would never vote for in a million years, but he earned it with the Rohrabacher Farr Amendment, right? You know, we like to say that Hempfest is a demonstration in 2 ways. It's a demonstration against the cannabis laws. It's also a demonstration of what the cannabis community is capable of, that we can produce a professional, world-class event year after year with nothing going wrong, right? And we don't think it's a mistake that Washington was one of the first states to legalize in the nation, because when you bring 100,000 people down to the park that smoke pot all day, all weekend, nothing goes wrong. You can't deny that that's there. You can't deny all those people are there. You can't say that oh, you know, there's not all these people that support pot, or it's harmless. We proved it year after year after year, and we believe that we tilled the soil here, and we connected all these people and helped to create a community in you know, Western Washington.
Yep.
And on the West Coast, right, and kind of define what a protestable can be, right? Because we consider Hempfest a protestable, because you got to hemp present and you got to raise the temperature, you know. And I'm very empathetic to this. I have a lot of empathy, you know, for what we're doing, because we're making hempstery. And I'm sorry I couldn't hemp myself, you know. I just had to go there.
30 years of hemp puns.
Vivian, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about Hempfest. For people who just joined in or joined a little later, where can we go to find, follow, support what you guys got going on at Seattle Hempfest?
Thank you, Lauren, so much. It's been my honor and my pleasure. Hempfest.org is the place to find out information about Hempfest. You can always hit us, of course, on Facebook /Seattle Hempfest or Twitter, even though our social media is a little slow right now this time of the year. And once again, on October 10th and 11th, we'll be at hempfestonline.org.
Dope. All right. We'll throw those links in the description. Thanks again for coming on, and thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.